thinking about what comes next in our modernizing drive to make everything new, I can't help but look at the monarchy, being an Englishman and a Britishman. And I want to ask you a question once I've quoted a passage from C.S. Lewis from you to get your reaction to this and what it might mean should we lose the monarchy. C.S. Lewis wrote, "Monarchy can easily be debunked, but watch the faces. Mark well the accents of the debunkers. These are men whose taproot in Eden has been cut, whom no rumour of the polyphony, the dance, can reach. Men to whom pebbles laid in a row are more beautiful than an arch." On the modernising front, David, what would it mean for the country of Great Britain to lose the crown?
Well, the crown, I'm afraid, is busy losing itself. That's the most terrifying thing. The coronation of King Charles was a self-conscious rupture. It is the first coronation since, I commented on it at the time and got much abuse. It's the first coronation since 1689 when Parliament wasn't present. In other words, the coronation, as King Charles reinvented it, with the aid of the now man known to be dreadful, Archbishop Welby, that coronation seemed like a merely private religious act. It had no connection whatever with the way that we are governed. This is a catastrophe. We're a parliamentary monarchy. The king seems completely unaware of the fact. I would argue it goes back, I'm afraid, to the reign of the blessed Queen Elizabeth II. Queen Elizabeth II, in my view, although she was very dutiful about her red boxes, fundamentally abandons her role as the centre of politics after the whole business of the succession and the fraught succession to Harold Macmillan, when there was a whole debate about would it be Butler or would it be Douglas Hume, and she takes such fright after that she effectively abandons her proper role as constitutional monarch, and it's compounded by the fact that she fetishizes the Commonwealth. This is utterly, utterly disastrous. It prolongs our imperial hangover. And of course, the Commonwealth increasingly becomes what, in my view, least matters historically, Africa. Whereas what mattered, of course, were the great realms, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and behind them, America. So the monarchy itself has, in my view, handled itself disastrously. And William is a perfectly decent chap, but nature intended him to be the manager of the second division football club.
Can you imagine?
No, I'm sorry. So I think it's become absolutely marginalized. And again, you see, and it's really important we recognize how fundamental the marginalization is. We are not a nation. Britain is not a nation. We are a pre-modern state. We were the union of two monarchies, Scotland and England, with radically different histories. The only bonds of union between them were Parliament and the monarchy. The bond of parliaments was broken by Blair and devolution quite deliberately, in my view. And the only thing that used to make you British at home, you weren't British. When you constantly see this terrible word Brits and Britons are naked and daub themselves in woad and fight the Romans. But what happened was that the only definition of being British was that you were a subject of the crown. This sense of direct loyalty to the monarchy has been completely lost. Again, it's hugely accelerated under Blair, deliberately by Gordon Brown, in which what you do instead, you try and invent being British. But you can't invent being British for the simple reason, if you go back, which are the first soccer internationals? Who were there between?
England and Scotland.
England and Scotland. Do you see what I mean? You were British abroad. It was the British Empire. You were English or Scots or Welsh or whatever it was at home. And what happens in the 1990s is, instead of loyalty to the crown, you try and define British values. And what on earth are these British values? They're totally vacuous. They are tolerance and diversity. In other words, anything goes. So because we've ignored this extraordinary, delicate tapestry of historic rival allegiances and hugely more in common, because really the differences between England and Scotland are paper thin, as James VI and first points out, when the first agitation for union comes from Scotland. Him back at the beginning of in 1604-5-6, arguing passionately in Parliament for union. But what you do instead, you replace this wonderful, delicate fabric of identity with something, Britishness, which is no more than a flag of convenience.
David, I think we have scratched the surface here and there's so much more to go. However, there is one more question I want to ask you before we ask one question from the subscribers, and it'd be great to also hear about what you're working on, but we'll get there in the fullness of time. So my final question to you, in front of the paywall, as it were, is what have you changed your mind about in the course of your life, and what was it that made you think differently?
Oh, what I've changed about is my politics. I was a libertarian. When I first came to real public attention, things like The Moral Maze on the BBC, I was a radical libertarian. I've become a conservative. In other words, I suppose I've rediscovered that history actually matters rather than is a jolly good way of living a nice life. I've been immensely fortunate, John. I've been able to make a very good living, look at this, a very good living out of something that I love. But as I've got older, I've realized it's more than that. I've realized that there are things which are on the point of vanishing irretrievably. And as I said, I think my own generation has made terrible, terrible errors, but we are the about to be missing link, as every week is a funeral. So I've changed my mind politically very sharply. And when I say conservative, I mean a Burkean conservative. I do not think the solution to our present discontents, as terrible as they are, is a kind of get up in the morning and think of something new. I'm fond of Nigel Farage. I know him quite well and all the rest of it. But I fear at the moment, it may change, there's a shallowness. There's just, let's reach something off the shelf. What we need is a recognition that what has gone wrong was a repudiation of this astonishing continuous history, which, you remember, we were unique in Europe in that we were able to preserve what you talked about, the monarchy, Parliament, the House of Lords, that historic constitution stretching, which Pericles again is the basis of a country, stretching right back. We were the only country that in the 19th century, because we had already had the idea that to be governed by law in Britain, in England really, is to take part in the making of it. That's what the idea of Parliament is about. You're bound by a law made in Parliament because you have been in Parliament either in person or via your representative. Now, that was mythical in the Middle Ages. In the 19th century, it becomes real. So whereas in France or Germany or Italy or wherever else you look at, people were clamoring to tear down the Ancien regime, in Britain, they were clamoring to become part of it. There's a fundamental conservatism. The Chartists weren't saying tear down Parliament. They're saying we want the vote. Even the women, even the monstrous regiment of the suffragettes, they weren't saying we hate Parliament. Saying we want to be there. It's no accident, is it, that the first female MP is one of the is one of the richest women in the country, Nancy Astor, with her magnificent town palace at the corner of St James's Square. And it's this Blair and the horror of Alistair Campbell, that master of propaganda, which is wonderfully described by F.M. Cornford as that branch of the art of lying. No accident. These people foolishly, shallowly tear it down. And what they do, they construct something, but it's not simply unhistoric, it is unfunctioning. As we know, every bit of the state is at war with every other bit of the state. Why we can do nothing. Why there's the absurdity of HS2. Why there's the absurdity of the Bat Tunnel. And that's because we ruptured our history. But conservatism is, and again, the Conservative Party absolutely forgot this. Theresa May, the nasty party or whatever. You are a conservative because you believe that the past is not a straitjacket. It's not a textbook. It's not how you do it. But it's this astonishingly fertile soil. And you don't grow a plant by uprooting it. And this is what we've tried to do in the 20th century. We've torn things up by their roots. And we've been surprised that they've withered.